Hello, everyone, and welcome to the consult room panel, Power of Who Community Engagement. We hope you're enjoying the convention, whether you are a virtual participant, in person, or both. We encourage you to check out all the various events that are happening on Discord and if you're on site and on YouTube. Um, but I'd like to go ahead and get started with our panel. We have a very lively panel with expert opinions. Um, I'll start with introductions. My name is Gordon Dymowski. By day, I am a professional writer and marketing strategist, but I also run Chicago Whovians United, which is used to be the Chicago Doctor Who meetup. So we do virtual and in-person Doctor Who gatherings in the Chicago area. Um, and you're always welcome to come to our meetings. And I'd like to turn it over to Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie. My pronouns are they, them. You might find me on social media as She Regenerated 13. Um, I am an artist, writer, cosplayer, all the things, just depends on the current hyperfixation. But it's generally related to my special interest, Doctor Who, especially 13 era and Phasmin. Um, and I really enjoy like engaging with the community. I really started to engage with the community online in like when we started going into lockdown and everything. And I made a lot of friends, lifelong friends and family. And that's one of my favorite things about Doctor Who also is just the found family, chosen family vibes. And yeah, I also really like working on collaborative projects. And I'll talk about some of them in here, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um, so I'll pass it along to Gabriela.
Hey, I'm Gabriela Santiago. She and they are both fine for me. By day, I work in the nonprofit industrial complex, and I am also a writer of works that are not always hopeful. There's a certain amount of body horror in them, but so is there in Doctor Who. And I am really looking forward to talking today with everybody about how we find joy in the struggle and how we use Doctor Who to make continuing to fight against injustice sustainable for us long term, and the ways that Doctor Who might bring us hope in different ways from other science fiction fantasy properties that we enjoy and take inspiration from. And then I believe Kevin's next.
Hello there. My name is Kevin Litten. I apologize for my rough voice, but I'll tell you, you're not going to catch anything over Zoom with it. I'm here in western Wisconsin, where as we're speaking now, it's snowing like you wouldn't believe outside. I saw my first Doctor Who in 1982, and I became a fan in 1999. And I found out I had a whole community to join. It was very interesting. Those were the desert years where we're wandering around with no new Who. We read a lot of novels and just shared our experiences with each other. I met some wonderful people along the way. Um, I'm going to give this over to Gordon.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin. So I'd like to start our conversation with kind of an obvious question. And several of our panelists have referred to it, but what is it? Not only how has the show influenced how you engage the greater community and how you kind of do good and find joy, as Gabriela said, but what values did you take from it? How has it inspired you um, to start moving forward?
Yeah, I think Craig Ferguson said it best in a song several years ago on his show. Intellect and romance over brute force and cynicism is really one of the core values of Doctor Who. For me, when I first think of like hopeful science fiction shows, I think of my roots with Star Trek, particularly Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And for me, that's like a really beautiful vision of a hopeful future of us all working together and in the struggle together, creating this utopia that this so there's this idealized future we work towards. And in Doctor Who, so often there's not an idealized future. No matter where he lands, there's something, or she or they land. There's something going on that needs to be fixed, but there is hope in that an individual or a small group of people can make changes and bring something closer to the greater good. A quote that is very inspirational to me is from Battlefield, where the brigadier says, in response to the monster taunting him, that, like, are you the best the earth can offer? I just do the best I can. And I think that's something that as a child, I would have felt was a cop out, like, ugh, just doing the best you can. No, you should be doing 100%, more than 100%, all the time, every time. But the older I get, the more I'm like, no, consistently doing just the best you can is incredibly heroic. Like, no matter how small that is, no matter what little action that is. So for me, I think that is one of the core values of Doctor Who that's really influenced me, is just that quote, I just do the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something for me that I think about a lot is actually the 13th Doctor's first like big speech in her debut episode. We're all capable of the most incredible change. We can evolve while still staying true to who we are. We can honor who we've been and choose who we want to be next. And that has helped me through like a lot of life's changes and struggles that I faced, and also when I find myself ruminating, I also think about some of the things Gabriela said as well. Um, and yeah, it just places a lot of agency on the individual. And that's something that I have not always like been allowed to have. And so kind of honoring, who I was and what I went through, I can like choose how to move forward, and the parts of that person I want to keep with me as I like regenerate. So and then there's also the element of hope, which is um, like present in just all of Doctor Who. But one of the ones I think of is darkness never sustains, even though sometimes it feels like it might. And that's when the 13th Doctor in Spyfall Part 2 is with Noor and Ada, and there's war going on outside, and it just feels like it's the end of the world, and it is, but it also, there is hope that things will get better, and sometimes it's cyclical, but it's because of people like them that you can choose to be like too, and move forward and try to make things better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for me, the watching Doctor Who, I think the value was that I think I learned that I could value my own intelligence and wit because it's here's a guy a character who managed to do right, and I grew up in a family that didn't quite value intellect and reason. It was basically if I could get into fights, that was great. And I kind of learned to have a healthy, anti-establishment attitude, but be able to call out stuff but also learning to speak out when things were wrong. I mean, I'm the the speech that lands in my head is the fourth Doctor in Pirate Planet, where he said, where the captain is like, he's scolding the captain about, hey, all you have is a big toy that crushes planets. Well, I don't, Captain responds, well, it's not a toy. And the Doctor screams, then what's it for? And I think I think it's the being, for me, it was learning to be able to call out what things are done, but to also work on a smaller scale that, I was never going to have a time machine that I could go around the cosmos, but I could at least do things within my orbit to make things better. And I think that's one of the things I learned about Doctor Who is that it's not always about big universal issues. It's sometimes about little what's right in front of you and taking care of that.
What a segue.
Hmm.
Um, Back in the wilderness years, we read, we watched the stories and we read the books, and there was a book called License Denied. And in there, it talked about how Douglas Adams, who wrote The Pirate Planet, was the script editor for many years for the program. And they were able to interview him in the book. And he said that he always tried to show three things. The first one was that growing up does not mean cutting off your emotions. The second one was that friendship is important. And the third one, and I've written it down here, forgive me if I read it, is the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a shower of diamine acid or a redirected neutron star or even a chronic hysteresis, but people who have lost the capacity to laugh at themselves.
Mm.
And you read that, your mind just goes, you know, because that's really deep and you can live your life on that. It's something we should all take to heart. Friends are important. Growing up doesn't mean losing your emotions. And when you've reached the point that you can no longer laugh at yourself, you are the most dangerous thing in the universe. And we can look around us at the people who've lost that, and it's like how sad for them and how bad for us. So those are rules from Doctor Who on how to live your life. And Douglas Adams, when he wrote his stuff and he did those scripts, he incorporated that, and hopefully it's the message has gotten to us. Those things are all important, and they're things we can live by.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point about the whimsy and the joy of Doctor Who. And that's one of the big things that I think makes it different from a lot of other science fiction is it is a lot about like this main character is ridiculous sometimes, but they know how to laugh at themselves and they know how to find joy in this long, long life that's so full of pain. And I think like when I started getting more involved in things like calling my representatives or attending protests in like the 2016 times, like there's this little bit of puritanness in a lot of us Americans where we're like, well, I can't enjoy this because it's important. I have to be serious all the time. And if I'm enjoying it, I'm doing it wrong. And so I'm kind of looked a little sidelong at people like showing up to protest with funny signs or costumes and things like that. But like as time has gone on, I've realized that no, you have to be silly with it. You have to find those moments of joy in it.
Mhm. And it's
Growing
also,
up in the
go ahead.
growing up in the 60s and 70s, I'm sure you've watched the television from them. And even on Doctor Who, it's all about Cold War hysteria. The commies are going to sneak around behind us and shoot us in the back or find some other nefarious way to put us down. And so much of what was also out there led us to believe that, by the time I turned 40, I'd probably be marching on Moscow with a rifle in my hand. And Doctor Who kind of went against the grain on that. I didn't see it until the 80s, and by then communism had fallen a few years. But it's not about that military right stuff mentality. It's like the universe is better than that. We're not all going to end up wearing uniforms and following orders, and it's not all going to be about philosophical debates and force and violence. Um, and that's good. That's what makes it so enjoyable in many ways.
Yeah, and I think the new series kind of takes a lot of that spirit from the old series in terms of not just the silly, not just having fun with being active, but being very direct and blunt about what's wrong. You've got the third Doctor and the Silurians. Brigadier blows up the Silurian caves. Doctor says, "Oh, that's murder." The fourth Doctor with the two wires in Genesis. Do I have the right to murder Daleks? Um, fast forward to Army of Ghosts Doomsday, where the 10th Doctor is telling the Cybermen, "You're in your homes. You've got their children. Of course they're going to fight back." Um, and the 12th Doctor saying, "I do this because it's kind." I mean, and I think there's that kind of sense of it's not just have fun with it, but also know where you stand. Um, do things out of kindness and consideration. And I think there's a lovely sense of wonder and humility to the show that I think Star Trek has kind of lost. Because to me, Star Trek, although I still watch it, to me it feels more like you have it on because you've always had Star Trek on. Whereas Doctor Who, it feels like even if you take an era that's at its worst, whatever you consider that to be, there's still that spirit of hope and humility and just openness to doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
So, Gordon, I'm going to go off just a little bit. I'm sorry for interrupting there, but when you see me at console room, I will be wearing my full Sixth Doctor costume.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about as eccentric as you can get. And I figure if you're going to be the doctor, you might as well be the one wearing the clown suit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You've got to laugh at yourself. You hope other people will laugh with you. And I hope that they'll understand he's wearing that because he's making a statement. He's going to wear this crazy thing and hopefully you'll be there with him. So anyway, I'll see you there, Gordon. Now, you don't have to tell me what you're going to wear, but
Okay, well, I'm
Was
actually
Charlie gonna
not
say
planning to be
something?
there in person, so
oh,
uh, but thank you for the invite. I think in that spirit, I will dress as I'll wear a bow tie. I'll dress as Matt Smith, just in that spirit.
Yeah. I won't be there in person. But I like to look at like not just the things that happen with the doctor directly, but also the impact that they have on their
Hmm.
companions and like side characters and how that like relates to the doctor or the show's impact on us.
Hmm.
Um, and that goes for like darker times in like in Torchwood, where Gwen's talking about how like the doctor must turn away in shame. And um, in the most recent, the war between the land and the sea, um, that's I don't know people who have seen it, but like there is an edit circulating around that uses the Gwen's audio with clips from that, so it definitely relates. Um, and more like optimistic outlook on that are things like the companion support group. I don't know if that's an official term, but that's what we've been calling it
Hmm.
after at the end of The Power of the Doctor, where um, Graham and Dan like uh, come across Yaz after being dropped off by 13, and they go to a support group with other companions, and some old faces, some new faces. Uh, some like to think of like the empty chair for Sarah Jane and others who couldn't come, or a laptop for folks like zooming into the companion support group,
Hmm.
sitting on the chair. But that just like I don't know, thinking about the wide array of like applications and how like thinking about the doctor and adventures with the doctor like in flux when Yaz and the doctor were separated. I think because of how like the pandemic was affecting like how they had to change plot and stuff so that like maybe if Jodie got sick or Mandip got sick, they could keep filming. But how it worked out was like Yaz had a like what would the doctor do on her hand. And I think that's a lot like how a lot of us kind of go through life and how the show's impacted us too.
Hmm.
If we aren't really sure, we're at a crossroads. Think about what would the doctor do, or a companion, or whoever you find a connection with in the show.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's one of the beautiful but also sometimes tragic things about the show is that when the companions have learned all that they can from the doctor, so often that's when they choose to leave because they're like, I've learned this bravery and this need to stand up for what's right from you, and now I morally can't just keep traveling around with you having adventures. I have to take a stand in my own home. So Joe leaves the doctor to go travel up the Amazon. Tegan has had a few different people say what she did. Sometimes it's Aboriginal rights, sometimes it's environmentalism, other things. Ace, of course, founded a charitable earth. But we see, yeah, they've had that wonderful impact on their companions.
Mhm. Well, let's kind of shift the conversation because we're all talking about the doctor's impact, not just on us, but his companions. But a lot of times that, as both Charlie and Gabriela pointed out, their companions have kind of taken that and moved on. So it's not just, hey, doctor, see you. I mean, it's more like they want to do things in our community. So I kind of want to open up the conversation to what experiences have we had, whether it's kind of a one shot or it's something that we do on a regular basis? How do we play out kind of how how do the show's values play out in our lives and how do we engage with them in our everyday life?
So let me tell you a story here. It might be a little longish, but you can cut it, right? Um, so I started going to science fiction conventions back in the year 2000. And after a few of these, it won in maybe the early aughts, and it was wonderful summertime thing. I'm sitting around the pool. It's 2 in the morning, and we're all well lubricated. And here's this guy shows up in a full Captain Kirk outfit, the whole bit, the avocado shirt and all that. And for whatever reason, I just started slamming into him. You know, Star Trek is a bunch of philosophical crap. You got these men wearing pajamas. They don't have money. They don't have pockets. And they're doing a military takeover of the galaxy. And you're really into that. How do you live with yourself? So I threw that out there, and he goes, you might be right. I do this because, my wife, and I haven't seen all the stories yet, so I'm not sure what's going on. But, I understand when we started forming up these groups, they call them ships or something like that, that Gene Roddenberry was still alive. And he said, if all we're going to do is meet and talk about Star Trek, it's going to go nowhere. You got to do something. And the something we do is we raise money for a children's hospital. And suddenly I felt like this big. It's because maybe I am philosophically correct. Maybe my hero is better than his hero, but he's doing something for the community. He's doing something for what he believes in and what's right. And my Doctor Who group was having a lot of fun. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope that we, as a Doctor Who fan group, are doing something for our communities besides just improving ourselves, which is quite a big, massive undertaking. I think Miss Santiago had some stories about what Console Room was doing. Do you recall any of that, or?
Yeah, so I know we've had a few different groups attend. There was a great group that did fundraising through running, themed around different fandoms. And you got like medals for completing certain amounts of running and it raised money. I don't remember the details of that, but I know Console Room has the charity auction every year, run by the Geek Partnership Society. I'm not a part of the Geek Partnership Society, but I have definitely benefited from some of their stuff before. And I just really enjoy that they're out there. So the money that is raised through that auction, which you should check out throughout the weekend, sometimes new items pop up. And you can also scroll it online. That goes to a lot of cool initiatives. They've got writing contests, encouraging people to write. They bring authors into St. Paul Public Schools. They have scholarships for folks to go to space camp. I think a lot of really great stuff, encouraging art, encouraging creative thinking and critical thinking, and encouraging people to dream big. I think if you yourself enjoy creating things in a fanish way, whether that's fan fiction, fan art, I still call them fan vids. I know some people call them AMVs or stuff now, the youth. But if you enjoy that, that is a great way to kind of dip your toes into doing raising some money. Way back in the old live journal days, there would often be big fandom auctions where you could put this stuff out there. People would bid on it in the comments. You got the proof of donation, and then you created something for them throughout the year. Live journal is not quite as active as it once was, but I last year found out that there is a yearly thing called Fandom Trumps Hate, which is very similar. You can put out what you're willing to write or draw or create, podfic, AMVs, whatever it might be. You can also offer services like editing somebody's stuff, what you're willing to do, what kind of fandoms you're willing to do, what kind of genres, the length you're willing to create. And people will bid on that. And you can choose to have it divided amongst certain charities that they've chosen. You can choose some charities within that are closer to your heart. They do a really great job of finding charities that are not as widely known. So like they're not going to be putting like ACLU or Trevor Project up there because those are pretty well known. People know what they do. But they'll put smaller LGBTQ plus charities or smaller civil rights charities that maybe don't get the big national attention. So that is a really great way to create something, make you feel good about yourself in that you're creating art and putting it out in the world, give somebody a gift that they'll really enjoy, and also be raising some funds.
Yes, I love talking about this. So I get really excited whenever I talk about Doctor Who, but also when I talk about different projects and like helping people is like my favorite thing. Maybe other than Doctor Who, I don't know. They kind of go hand in hand. But I have different art pieces and stuff that like purchases of different prints or like acrylics. I think I have like keychains and stuff and commissions on my Ko-Fi. But those will go to like various charities depending on what the design is. I know like Jamie Gallagher. Let's see, like if you've seen the like Pride TARDIS pins, like David Tennant had one, and then there's like the Pride line of the Duckadoos and a bunch of other things. Those go to the Albert Kennedy Trust to support young LGBTQ plus people living with homelessness and such. That's all on that website. And then there are also like fan projects that are more collaborative. Like this one, I did not get to take a part in contributing to because I didn't know about it till it was already happening. But more of the universe, 13 Queer Stories for 13 and Yaz. And then there was another one like that, but focused on like Doctor Who Flux that I did take part in. And that one is, if you like go on social media, it'll be like at the 13 Archives. So 13 Archive was like our like little group name on social media, but we raised like $340. And that went to two different charities. One was helping with Hurricane Helene relief because one of our members was impacted by that. And then Goma Actif, I think, for helping people in Congo because we were like making all this art and stuff made with cobalt, which is unethically sourced there. So, and I know like a lot of us will go to cons and stuff and meet Jody, and so we've like been able to ask like, you know, what charity, you know, would you like this project that we're doing to like donate to and things like that. And I'm just like, I love being a part of it. I love supporting these things. And I love like learning about all these other things going on. And it wasn't a Doctor Who one, but I did want to, like, I didn't have the capacity, but like I wanted to set something up with Fandom Forward, which ran for like 19 years. But I took part in the Our Flag Means Death project with them. Well, that was like growing its fandom. And that was really fun. And I love seeing like the impact and the power that we have as a fandom. We can do so much more than just like have our little infighting on, you know, Twitter or whatever. Like we can like make real impact. We can make change that like, you know, the doctor would be proud of us for doing and be the best of humanity. And I just love like nourishing that element of our community.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, my kind of activism and my Doctor Who inspired activism, it's kind of been a lifelong thing. I've been, um, I actually, ironically, my professional background is I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. So yes, you could honestly call me the master, in certain contexts. But I'd always worked in social services. I had worked with homeless populations in St. Louis, and I'd always, even when I moved back to Chicago after living outside of it for a while, I had done like volunteer work with various organizations. In fact, I was charity auction director for Chicago TARDIS for about 5 years. I kind of helped get that set up and moving. Um, and so for me, it's always been kind of a like, um, I can't necessarily separate the two. Like I've done, you know, um, the Who meetup for me is kind of like a way to give back and create some of that same energy that I felt as a fan, like being able to have a place where people can go. Um, and I think the one event, and I kind of want to kind of like the other kind of the only other question I have for the panel is, was there like one specific incident where you kind of where it kind of came together and you realized, aha, I got it? Because the event I want to talk about is that about 3 years ago, I was living in a Chicago neighborhood named Beverly, and it was about a year after I'd been caring for my mom out there, was living out there until she passed. And a year after she passed, my apartment building, as well as five other apartment buildings, were purchased by a property management company who then terminated everyone's leases in those buildings for no cause and did not give us an explanation. And so luckily one of my neighbors had called an organization called named Metropolitan Tenant Organization. And as part of it, it was one of those processes where we started doing meetings to form a tenant union, and people were, the organizers were like, Gordon, there's a guy here who can represent your building, your units. And I'm like, oh, and I didn't want to do it because it's like I'm still dealing with grief over mom. Yeah, I um but then it was like, you know what? Hey, this is not just about me. It's about the community. Other people are losing their homes. A lot of them were just working people. A lot of them were elderly. There are like two or three other caregivers in that building. And it was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And what was cool about the process was that outthink, we had to figure out how to strategize against a property management company. So they would put flyers about the meeting on the front doors. Those would get torn down. So we said, okay, we'll just tape them. We've got one person in each unit. One person goes up 6 flights of stairs. I was part of that. Well, they would tear them out those doors. So it's like, okay, we'll just slip them under the door. And then at one point, we're trying to get an audience with the property management company that's, they're playing games. So we decide one day, we're just going to go up and have just a nice, calm, rational conversation. So we go there, we're asking to see the man in charge. He slips out and is driving away in the opposite direction. And as we're explaining what's going on, the employees are like, we don't know. And I think that the moment that I personally take pride in is one of the organizers had asked, asked me, hey, do you think it's possible that we could like Google bomb review bomb on Google to drive their score down? And I said, well, not only should we do that, but there's benefits to that. And, if you know the right keywords, you can make sure those things stick. It's almost as if they didn't expect there to be um, a digital marketing guy who also knows how to write in with. We did that. That went down. The property management company decided to go after MTO. I was able to go there and say, hey, here's the situation. That ended. Eventually we got some concessions. So we got some moving expenses taken care of. Some of us got extensions on our lease. Some of us were able to get an extensions if we couldn't get out in time. But that's kind of where, and now I also now work as kind of I work for MTO as a contractor, kind of helping out with more of their policy issues. Um, and for me, that's kind of where I feel like my Doctor Who fandom and the values kind of came together because it was just a reminder that, when you're fighting for right, you find the people, you find your allies, you're allowed to kind of be okay. I can do things that are ethical and that I kind of feel very proud that even though it was a rough time and even though we didn't get everything we wanted, it was like, yes, this is what Doctor Who means to me. It's about anyone can do the right thing. And I'd like to open it up to the panel. Like, are there any specific instances where you feel like, yes, it came to a head, I get it. This is like this is my moment, if that makes sense.
You're a counselor, and I'm sure you've heard that, if you look at the Freudian explanation of why we're here, it's all about the trauma. And if you look at the Jungian explanation, it's all about our inner fantasies. But any way you look at it, it's about making us better people. We have these surrogate friends that are on TV shows, and we spend hours and years with them. In many cases, like Doctor Who, we've known our Doctor Who friends longer than anyone but our families. And of course, the life imitates art. We are imitating our friends who have these wonderful properties. They're brave, they're intelligent, they struggle, they succeed. And it's a good thing we're into this show instead of something, like NCIS or Criminal Minds or something. I always wonder about those people. And I'm going to just leave it there and see if anyone has something to comment on that.
Yeah, I don't think I have a particular moment that I can think of. I think with a lot, if I'm frightened at a protest, I tend to draw a little bit more on my Star Trek folks. And I don't think there's any inherent morality to media. It serves different things. The dark stuff I watch or read serves different purposes for me to explore those emotions. But I think perhaps the most valuable thing I've gotten from Doctor Who is to just do something. I
Mhm.
think there's so many forces in the world, especially today, but always, that make us hesitate to do something, especially if, like me, you've got like an anxiety disorder. I'm like, but what if it's taken wrong? What if this doesn't work? What if the thing I do actually harms someone? And it's like, no, post the laptop you're not using anymore on Buy Nothing. Ask your neighbor if they'd like some extra cookies. Like, see if anybody wants some help repairing something. Donate to that cause. Show up at that protest, even if you can only do 15 minutes before you get like sensory overwhelm and you have to leave. Like, something is more than nothing. And I think the fact that the doctor and the companions always try something is maybe the most valuable thing I've taken from it.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes doing nothing is doing something and not in the way that you think it is. Um, I don't know if there was like what was the prompt was just like,
Yeah,
was
was
there a
there,
moment
yeah, was there like one moment that kind of felt like, um, you got it, that kind of crystallized it for you?
um about like trying to do the right thing and things like
Right,
that? I
like
don't,
that kind of crystallized how the
yeah,
values of Doctor Who
Like your
impacted.
fandom and your values coming into alignment.
Mhm.
yeah, I can't think of a specific moment. I can just think of like how interesting it is how like we get so many different things out of Doctor Who, and like I can get something out of it. I can see that we could watch the same me and another person could watch the same episode. I could see, love, hope, change. like all these things that I find inspiring and good. And then someone else could get a totally different, like they get something totally different out of it. Um, and so I like to think and I like to hope that like like the doctor, like people can change. Um, and like maybe through a love of the show, there will be a moment where something clicks with them. And that's maybe not always the case. Because there are like some Cybermen and Daleks out there, but that's just like one of the a sort of interesting element I think of, because like there's always like whether it's like a subtle messaging or like what's criticized as like being super blunt, like just telling the audience how to feel, like it still varies if the person watching it will get whatever is trying to be said. So I find that is like one of the sort of complex, often puzzling sort of elements of humans. Basically, um, I find it really interesting, um, how all our different brains interpret things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I think the great thing about Doctor Who is that no matter where you come from in terms of the show, as Charlie stated, we all kind of take lessons from it. And I'd like to kind of bring this panel to the close just to get some parting thoughts for you, kind of looking at Doctor Who and activism and dealing with the community and doing right. Is there anything that maybe you didn't get a chance to say, or something that you just kind of feel like you want to leave the panel on? What, the kind of note you want to leave the panel on?
I will just quickly say, we talked a little bit about fandom auctions. So just be aware that there are some copyright issues that you need to be aware of around that. Make sure you're not like charging for a fan fiction story, but it's a reward for a donation. But try something, get out there, meet people, see what they want to do with you.
Yeah, building off of that, just like I'm a member of Hermits United over here, but like making those connections with other people in the community. Um, and Doctor Who is a great way to do that, because you have a mutual love for the show, or love to hate for some folks. I don't know, whatever, vote your vote. But I mean, that's, touching on the last thing I talked on, like that's also one of the beautiful things about the show is that, um, like if you aren't a fan of like the current era or Doctor or whatever, like there's an endless amount of like content, comic stories, like, and you can always just kind of leave and come back and find love in whatever's next. And in the meantime, you can always, rewatch things or work on, projects and things like that. And it really helps pass the time between new episodes as well. But as my um, gosh, parting message, I I'll just I'll just go with travel. Hopefully, the universe will surprise you constantly.
Mhm.
I alluded to growing up in the 60s and 70s. We had the Vietnam War and we had the evil empire and we had the various things going on, and it's nice to know to have your fantasy hero as a guy who does not conform. He's not part of the military or the industrial right stuff complex. He's not steering you in a particular way and you gotta go there. No, he's saying, if it's right, it's right. Do this. You don't have to buckle under. You don't have to be like them. And it's perfectly fine. And when you attend a convention like Console Room, you're going to see all sorts of people there. And many of them are very much not like me. but they accept me, and I must learn to accept them if I'm going to be like my hero. I hope we all enjoy being with the diversity we have and the people with their various ideals and what they're getting from the show. It's good that when we sit down, if we argue about anything, it's about the writers. Um, and enjoy the program for what it is and what it's done for us.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think one of my key principles is that any fandom is best enjoyed when it's shared. When you're not just, we can enjoy Doctor Who watching it on our own. And I think my best moments were when we had shared, when I was with other people, whether it's just a simple meetup or around the 50th when I had 200 some people in the same restaurant with multiple rooms seeing Day of the Doctor.
Hmm.
And I think the one thing that I take from that is that as long as I approach my fandom with an open mind and an open, kind heart and act out of kindness, I think that is the least I can do. And I think that one of the great things about, I think it, in listening to your stories, I think the one thing that we all share is that even though Doctor Who, it may not be at the forefront of our mind as we're going out and doing, whether it's going to a protest or just treating somebody else with kindness and respect, that's something that's part of our kind of ethical DNA and as part of our who we are. Um, and I think it's just wonderful. It's one of the reasons why I love being a Doctor Who fan. And so on that note, I'd like to bring the panel to a close. I want to thank my fellow panelists for their time and insight. And for you on YouTube, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe this video. Check out the other YouTube panels. If you're part of the convention on site, have fun. If you're one of the virtual attendees, check out, we've got plenty of stuff on Discord and YouTube. Thank you very much for your time and um, have fun at the con. See you soon.
See you soon.